Paula was here. She did her first workshop for us on teaching with empathy last year, and then she had a new article that came out, and we talked about doing something more and revisiting this topic, because I think it's so important, and talking about some more maybe hands-on and practical kinds. What can you actually, what can we do with our students in the classroom and so on. So, with no further ado,
yay! Thank you so much. Hi everyone. Welcome. I am so happy to see you. As Mary said, it is such a fiercely busy time of the year and semester. You took the time, and that matters to me. I'll present for about half hour or so, and what I will endeavor to do is deconstruct some of my teaching and share with you more intimately what it is that I aim to present every time that I enter the classroom, because I find that the success of each class depends certainly on the rigor of the preparation, but on actually something more than that. For me, I believe for all of us as people of great faith, it also means allowing room for the Holy Spirit to come through. Part of my preparation always concludes with my creating quietude for a moment or two to allow a certain emptiness. All the points that I'm about to make, I let go out of my head, even for just a few moments. And I pause. I usually do this right outside my classroom door before entering, and I simply send up a 2-word prayer, use me. And that's my shorthand to God, Blessed Mother, the angels and saints who might choose to be with me, the Holy Spirit. Use me, come, I invite you. I've learned after a lot of years of stubbornness that the Holy Spirit responds to the slightest invitation. Help me, God, help me. And it's extraordinary because with the humility that comes in surrendering this vessel and all these years of learnedness and education and all of the hours of preparation to a force higher than, mightier than any one of us standing alone, we allow for the shifts in perception in our own selves and in our student selves that are the stuff of miracles. So, that said, I want you to know I did say that prayer just before beginning. Use me. Because now I am in a place of grace with you, because you are esteemed teachers all, and you took the time to be here. You could be anywhere else, but you're here. I'm grateful for that. I'm humbled by that. And to the extent that I might have something to contribute, what a privilege, what an extraordinary moment. It's that thinking that engages me before each and every class. To do the work, my process is essentially threefold. Before class, hours before, as I begin the nuts and bolts and the rigors of preparation, I ask myself, in looking at material that likely is not very new to me, but will surely be new to my students, what would it take for me, with fresh eyes, without the conversancy that I have, to understand this material? What I'm doing then is putting myself in my students' shoes. That's all that empathy is. There's no magic to it. It is feeling into the experiences and struggles of another. We're hardwired to be empathetic beings. That is so hopeful to me. At times when our level of national and international discourse and states of affairs lead me to lose for the short term a certain modicum of hopefulness, I go back to our very hardwiring our neurochemistry, that vagus nerve that courses through the entirety of our physiology. We are hardwired to feel into the experiences of another. That's why when we get sucked into a game show or a contest and we find ourselves rooting, somehow in my life, I always find myself by a TV screen during the last 6 minutes of Wheel of Fortune, when the contender who clearly wants to win and so clearly is counting on a win, if it can come, gets those letters, R-S-T-L-N-E. And then those letters have to fill in this morass of blank spaces. And then she guesses her 2 consonants and a vowel. And then she's given 15 seconds. I stop. And immediately I'm watching, even if I'm at an airport and it's closed captioning, and I am rooting for her. And my heart races a little bit. And then sometimes the contestant gets it and she wins. And I'm happy. I am so happy. $35,000. Oh, that's going to help her. Yeah. And then I think to myself, as we would say in the Napolitan, what are you? But are you a Mameluke, which means, are you a Stunad, which means, what kind of cloudy thinking are you engaging in? Why are you so happy? You don't even know her. And then, as a student of the science of mind and learning, I remind myself, it's the vagus nerve. And all those endorphins that she's feeling are now getting released to me because I get to bear witness to her connecting to something good. That's what we do as teachers. When it all goes right, and sometimes it doesn't, but when it does, we get to bear living witness. We're the midwives to the birth of knowledge. I had my last class in commercial law today. I have a group at the law school who will be graduating within a month. They're the December graduates, as our former esteemed associate dean. Now you're so lucky to have him on this campus. Dean Eric Lilquist can readily remember and attest. We got to honor in a capstone each of those soon to be awarded Juris Doctors. And there was something extraordinary about that moment. Again, bearing living witness to the birth of a new lawyer. We get to do that every day. We get to be the fiduciaries. We get to be the engines, the enablers, and then the witnesses to the birth of newfound knowledge, to the birth of a newfound sense of purpose and self and direction and joy that our students might find through us. Maybe even, if we're lucky, because of us. Because empathy is reciprocal. Just as we can feel into the experiences of another, our students can feel into our experiences. It becomes essential then that we do the work before we open that classroom door to be certain of, number one, the first of 3 steps in my process, as I'm thinking about what would it take to make this material understandable. Now that I've thought about it and hopefully hit the right notes in making it accessible and challenging and exciting, what am I leading with? As I open that door and I enter that classroom, what am I leading with? I remember the teachers that I had who would be leading weighed down, literally, but also figuratively, not only by the bundle of papers, but seemingly the weight of the world. And they would walk in and not make eye contact with anyone, not even look up, deposit whatever work it was that needed to be handed back or whatever handouts were there onto the lectern, turn on the PowerPoint, and at the designated time, let's begin. There was a dispassion and a disconnect. And instantly, even if the energy in the room before the teacher's entry into it had been here, it drops. Because we are all empathetic beings, and the teacher is both thermostat and thermometer. Not only do we take the temperature of the room when we teach with empathy, we become the thermostat, adjusting the temperature in the room. So I make it my job, no matter how put upon I happen to be, no matter that my stomach might hurt, or I'm starving because I didn't get a chance to eat, or I just had to deal with an administrative issue that, why is this happening? And I might shake my head. Whatever it is, my son called and said, "Ma, are you going to deliver the groceries tonight?" He's a graduate student at Lincoln Center. And I'm thinking, Mike, you're 24. Why do I have to deliver the groceries? Again, because I'm an Italian mother, so of course I delivered the groceries. But I said to myself, why is he asking me that? And then I was agitated about that. I have to do the work, and it takes a lot of will sometimes to get rid of all that stuff. That's not my students' business, and that's not my business right now. My business, I'm their teacher. I'll never get this class back again. I'll never get this moment back again. That stuff, the beauty, I said to Jack, we have the greatest jobs in the world. We get to leave that sack at the door, and then we enter. When I enter, what am I leading with? 3 things. I am excited about this material. Today we did negotiable instruments, esoteric articles of the Uniform Commercial Code 3 and 4, and how to duly negotiate a promissory note and a draft. I mean, this is the stuff that could make you weep or quickly go to sleep. But I muster excitement. And it has to be real. So I'm thinking, why would it be so exciting to know about this? Because we've all written checks. Or students, your grandma's going to give you a check as a graduation gift because she loves you. As she signed it, did you know that she's the drawer? The bank on which she drew it is the drawee, you're the payee, and when it gets transferred to another because you're using it to pay off a pre-existing debt, are you duly negotiating it? Or what if you endorse it and you lose it? What does that turn that check now endorsed into? These are the bundles of questions that we can relate to as citizens of the world. I then communicate my excitement as I say, I'm excited about this because now you know. And your relatives will love for you to show off your newfound knowledge. So as you get those graduation gifts, and ask for cash or checks, but either form of currency, you can use it as an opportunity to talk about negotiable instruments. We're going to render you learned about that. What I'm communicating is I'm excited to be learned about that. Even if, I'm not really that excited about it, but there could be a lot of excitement, as if becomes us. Shakespeare, assume a virtue if you have it not, and it becomes yours. The fake it until you make it can work as well. You want to be a person of integrity? Act like one. I come in leading with, I'm excited. I'm excited about this material. And you're going to get excited with me because you're feeling into my enthusiasm for the material. Second, I'm leading with, I am happy to see you. That statement depends on teacher seeing student. I walk in and make it explicit. We live in a world where too much of the good goes unsaid. We know a lot of the bad, and 140 characters or now more gets said. But I make the seemingly assumed, when it's good, explicit. I say to my class, as I walk in, I am happy to see you. And then I scan the room, and I see you. Empathy's gateway. Here, I see you. I look. It's disarming. Students are not used to that. I see you. This generation, the digital natives, are not used to that. They see screens, phones, laptops, text. They need to get in the habit of assiduously cultivating eye contact and connectivity that is not virtual but real. We are teaching in the midst of an epidemic of facelessness. It is no accident that the incidences of substance abuse, including, especially on campuses, alcohol abuse and depression, are so high. Anxiety is running so high in our millennials, our students, our children. Part of it, I am convinced, is because we have lost the capacity for authentic human connection. There's something extraordinary that happens when you meet face to face and you put down your armor, you're willing to concede your vulnerabilities, and you treat another as an extraordinary human being with great dignity. Not because of the grade they got, but because they are. There's something extraordinary about saying face to face what you could have so angrily emailed about or texted about earlier in the day had you indulged that ever-present temptation. Because in the true FaceTime, as we lay down our weapons, something happens. It's called grace. It's not magic. It's grace. It is very, very easy to lose sight of the power of proximity if you are not cultivating it. Any relationship depends on work. I encourage my students to put down the screens. I don't allow laptops in the classroom, and we can have that conversation as well. But most essentially, I ask them when they leave the room to take out the earbuds, look away from the phones, and instead of the text, pick up the phone. Even the lexicon that our millennials use to talking about is distorted. They'll say, yeah, I'm talking to her about that. Even in romantic exchange, we're talking. No, you're not. You're texting. You're texting. There is a world of nuance and a range of subtlety and an art of eloquence that can only emerge in the moment when the power of human connectivity is present. I tell my students that the burdens of our own struggles and distractions do not relieve us of the responsibility to take the time, and it takes time, and we're so busy and so distracted, and what we have to do is so important, except that it's really not so important, that we don't take the time to see what needs to be seen. I try to see what needs to be seen. And even on my way into the classroom, we're in Newark. Newark is a laboratory for human suffering and human triumph. I really look, I see struggles. This morning, the weather has been mild this week. I took a quick walk just around our immediate block. And I saw a woman in a uniform who was either going to clean offices or coming home from a shift, and she had a child in tow, and it was an odd hour of the day. It was the morning, and when I presumed the child would be in school. And I thought, is the child sick? Did she just lose a day's wages having to pick up the child? Or did she lose her daycare, and does she have to scramble to get somewhere else? And then I say a prayer for her. May God bless her. May she feel hope today. If she'll make eye contact with me, and again, people won't do that, certainly not along the Northeast Corridor with any regularity, I smile. And my smile is endeavoring to communicate, you've got this, and I'm with you, and we've all been there. It's okay. If she doesn't make eye contact, I'm thinking it, I'm praying it. And then I bring it with me to my class. I opened today with that story, and I said, you are so put upon right now. You're taking exams, but I want you to have a sense of context. You're not the woman who is just about to begin a shift cleaning the offices down the street, who just finished, whose child may be sick today. Hence the reason she has him not in school, but in tow. You're not worried today about whether or not losing your day's wages will make or break your capacity to stay in your apartment. Therefore, for the grace of God, be grateful for today. Be grateful for the work. Be grateful for the privilege. Be grateful for the power that is coming with the education that you are receiving. Knowledge is power. It's the great equalizer. Truth. As I enter and I say, I'm happy to be here. I'm happy to see you. I'm thinking one other thing, and that is, I have secrets. I have information that I know that you're wanting to know. And maybe I'm going to tell you. It's amazing. But if you think that in any context, and I've said this to CEOs, I have suggested this to those who are brave enough to engage in the possibility of new love, about to meet someone for the first time in a Starbucks, always enter with, I am really happy to be here. I see you. I'm committed to seeing you, and I have a secret. Because it's extraordinary. The reptilian mind, the lizard brain, our empathetic acuities, so well evolved over time, we will immediately perceive as the person gets that smile that is more than happy, but is actually almost mischievous. I know something, it's delicious. You don't know it yet, but I may tell you. That look immediately sparks interest, even in the most otherwise disinterested listener, student. People perk up. Want to know how to do it? Watch Ronald Reagan. President Reagan was the master of the art. He went to acting school. He's an actor. He said he learned that in acting school. I'm really happy to be here. It might look something like, I'm happy to be here, but I'm really happy to be here, and I have a secret. Oh, then it gets more interesting. Now I'm entering and I'm thinking, hi everybody, and all of a sudden it takes on a different dimension. Like, yeah, there's something about to happen, and you're going to be so excited because you're about to get let in on it. I see you. The seeing you must persist throughout the class. I deliberately did not use a PowerPoint today, and I deliberately don't use a PowerPoint most days. It is an impediment to connectivity. For me, I find it distance making. And I notice that even when I'm off PowerPoint, my students are not looking at me, not responding to my cues. I can't respond to theirs because they're there. And they're making sure they get all the slides. I make them slides. I share with them basic data digested separately on Blackboard. I don't do it in class. I have my outline at the podium, but you'll notice I don't stay at the podium either. I don't want barriers physically to the connectivity. I want to see you. I want to be able to understand, did I just lose you? Do I still have you? Our students are speaking to us all the time. They speak to us with their participation, but they also speak volumes through their body language. I'm very alert to body language. I'm very alert as part of this first process. What will it take to make the material understandable, connected with what am I leading with to facilitate that process? Where is everyone in the class? Invariably, there will be a literal outlier, someone on the edges or on the margin who's not even within my frame of ready view. I look for that person. What are you doing there in the back row? Are you okay? Are you with the material? Why are you telling me that you're so dejected? Something happened. Something's going on. I see you. I'm not going to be calling out any of that, but I'll be responsive, and then I'll check it out later. I follow up. I learn my students' schedules, and then I look for the chance encounter where I know I might find them during the day, and I'll say, "Oh, Mary, how are you doing? I saw you this morning." And I always start with the positive. "You're such an excellent student. I'm excited about the work you'll be doing. How are things going today? I noticed you seemed maybe a little out of sorts. You were out last week. Do you need the notes? Did you get the notes?" That's an invitation. Not to pry, but for Mary to tell me what she feels she wishes to tell me, or at least come back if and when she wishes to talk with me. The student who never raises her hand, the student who's not participating, the student who looks down whenever the eye contact is made. I will be looking for that student, and not in an extraordinary way. I make it part of my aim to connect in all sorts of ways outside of the classroom, in small groups, large groups. And I'm going to make it a point to follow up, even on a pretext, to make sure all is well, connections are being forged, and what it might take to allow you to jump in to the discourse. What would it take? What are you feeling? I asked a student of color that question. She, I knew, was doing the work and was always prepared, because I would typically walk around the room and I would see, and she would have briefs of the cases, and I clearly saw that she was outlining and attentive. But every time I would ask for participation, she would put her head down. And she's someone who otherwise would make a lot of eye contact. So I spoke with her privately. I said, "Do you know what?" I happened to bump into her, and I said, "You work so hard. I really appreciate how carefully you're briefing. Why don't you volunteer when I'm taking volunteers?" And she said, "I get very self-conscious because I think that people will think that I don't know what I'm talking about." And this is what Claude Steele wrote about. This is stereotype threat. This is the internalization of a perception that another might have, having relegated you, the observed, to otherness. This was an internalization, a product of who knows how many experiences and how many years. So first I thanked her for being so brave to say that. And then I said, "Well, guess what? I think you're amazing. I think you're so bright. I think you're the most prepared person in that room. And I'm pretty discerning about these matters. I believe you've got this, and I think you know that. So I'm not going to demand that you participate, but I'm going to gently nudge." It worked. It worked. It took one time. She jumped in, and that was it. That leads me to something else. Now we're talking about the second step of the process, staying on point and prepared, but nonetheless in touch with what is happening in the room. That's important. That's an art. I say to new teachers, I work with new teachers all the time. That comes with time. Malcolm Gladwell was onto something when he talked about the 10,000 hour rule. It takes a lot of hours to get really proficient, to become masterful. I think it takes about a decade, at least, for a good teacher to really hit her stride. But eventually, a level of proficiency is developed so that the teacher knows where she needs to go, knows where she's been, and knows what is by keeping in touch with this. Everything we do is kind of the technique, but this is the art. All that I'm looking upon in that room, that is the art. So I will look around. When this student, Faja, made her point, immediately I affirmed it. And I do that routinely when points are right. And when points are not so right, I find gentle ways to say so without shaming. There is, I believe, real truth in the premise that wisdom and compassion are indivisible. If all you have is the technique, and you're quite precise and meticulous and mighty with the technique, that is surely a feat. But if all you have is that without the healthy dose of compassion and mercy for the struggle that the learning process ordains, I think you tend to become more menacing than teaching. And if all you have is the compassion, I feel for you. Without the technique, without the rigor of the preparation and the work, then you kind of become a mess. You need both. You need the technique, the rigor, fused with a healthy dose of compassion for the struggle that is the learning process. That's the good teacher. It's akin to the good parent archetype that we can all imagine ourselves into. The struggles of those fledgling baby steps, the struggles of those first endeavors, the vulnerability of being such a novice. We can feel into that and then experience the joy as the connections are made and offer the reassurance when the stumbles and falls are taken. In the classroom, empathy is fueled and empathic acuity is fostered, and the science and cognitive and neuroscience finally is able, through imaging, to corroborate so much of this, which parts of the brain light up, using several pedagogical techniques. First, stories. When I call on students, when I take volunteers, if we're dealing with a narrative, I say, tell me the story. In property, we finish reading zoning. Students come into class reading zoning. I ask, Inez, tell me the story of zoning. And Inez is a good student, a brilliant young woman. Will invariably begin with, it is a form of social and land use planning that was first developed in 1917 in New York City, and then later affirmed by the U.S. Supreme Court in Village of Euclid v. Ambler Realty. Excellent. That's the content. But tell me the story. Tell me the story. Now I'm asking my students to weave together the content-based narrative and put it into context. What was happening in 1917? And I might even make it personal. Inez, where did your family come from. We're a nation of immigrants. So is there an immigration history? And Inez might say, yes, my family came from Italy, or my family came from Ireland, or my family came from Ghana. Fill in the blank. And then I'll probe a little bit and I'll say, when? And Inez might know, maybe she doesn't. And I'll say, well, let's assume that maybe they came within the first or second wave of immigration. It's now 1917 on the streets of New York. The Vanderbilts, the Rockefellers, the Astors, the more privileged, were very used to having their pristine domains kept pristine, and exclusively their domains. This surge of others, the immigrants, were unseemly and unsightly to their aesthetic sensibilities. Ew, those people, they're so sweaty, they're so smelly. And now, Mr. Mayor, they are working across the street from our brownstone townhomes because some place called the Triangle Shirt Company decided to open up a factory that Mr. Mayor is open at all hours of the day and night. And God knows, I believe those people are living in the factory at night. They sleep there. And if they're not, they're living in this new form of housing, I don't know what to call it, maybe a tenement that is crowded and congested. And we even saw a rat the other day. Surely this must not be abided. That was the basis for zoning, to protect the more privileged classes from the other. However conceived, the immigrant, the desperately poor, the beleaguered, those who labored and toiled in the sweatshops of the time. Zoning was born in New York City, not by accident, but as a matter of social engineering to preserve a certain fortressing and a certain system of privilege, assured by the corrosive nature of pay-to-play and the governor's willingness to abide their wealthiest donors. That's how zoning began. So, how did the U.S. Supreme Court come to embrace it wholesale 5 years later? It wasn't hard. Who do you imagine was on the Supreme Court in 1922? A group of rather privileged white males. So let's think about that and talk about that. And where did they live? If you did the work, in the very enclaves that zoning would seek to protect. Zoning's legitimacy is part of a larger story and a larger context. By telling the story, all of a sudden it matters more why we need to know about zoning. Because guess what? Those exclusionary impulses that are somehow an endemic part of the human condition persist today. As townships and venues across this country, including in our great state of New Jersey, aggressively fight against any effort to use zoning to be inclusive, to allow the other in, because guess what else? The other is you. There is no other. Sorry, there isn't. And then we start talking about that. That's when I'll go to the screen. And that's when I'll show the streets of New York in 1917 and 1922. And I'll show the other. And that's when I'll show my paternal grandfather and maternal grandmother. Immigrants coming in within those initial waves who toiled, my grandmother in a sweatshop, my grandfather with a fruit stand on 22nd Street until he was told he couldn't be there anymore because the area was all of a sudden zoned for a different purpose. Now it gets personal, and it's only when it gets personal that it matters. It encourages my students, the amazing conversations that are had after zoning, because once they realize it matters and it may matter to people they love, They're going to talk about it with the people they love. And then once they've got that platform, to start with the why I care, the rest is kind of not so hard. By the way, there's a great book about this, Scott Sinek, S-I-N-E-K, Start With Why. I teach a leadership class. I have, as my mentor in leadership, Dr. Reuter knows, I have my students start with why. It's a great book. We get to the hows a lot, and as lawyers, we're great at the hows, but maybe not so great at the whys. Why are we doing this? Why? Why? What's the purpose? Start with why. Story is very effective in the classroom. Another very effective technique, engaging the room. Something called chunking that I believe you're familiar with. We learn in increments. So I will say, Michael, why don't you share with the class what you believe the 3 most important takeaways of the last 30 minutes are? And that allows Michael to think about it. Maybe there are 1 or 2 that come to mind, and maybe he'll say, I'll have to think about the 3rd. And then I might say, and Forrest, what would you add to that? What do you think about the wisdom of what your colleague Michael just said? Active listening is a gateway to empathy. So is the mirroring back. And by doing that, I'm helping myself as a teacher, because sometimes what we think we communicated is not what our listener heard. There's a great disconnect so many times. So Michael tells me his takeaways, and I'm thinking, really? And maybe I'm thinking, uh-oh, do you know what that? Michael is misunderstanding one of the fundamental precepts. And then I'll gently get it back to right and say, Michael, would you be open to the following? And I'll restate it. Michael will say, yeah, that's more precise. And then I would say to Forrest, would you confirm that Michael is right in thinking that's more precise? Now I'm promoting an inter accountability within the classroom, because you're not just an observer, you're also going to be a participant. And I'm going to be asking you to respond to what it is your colleagues say. Within the rubric of this second question, what's actually happening here? I'll use a variety of techniques because people learn in different ways. So I'll use the visual. Most students are visual. I'll use some auditory. I'll even use some kinesthetic. There's a great device that I just found. It's on Brookstone. And it's a sound ball. And it is a portable ball. It's kind of a fun, bouncy, big ball that has a microphone built in. And what you can do is toss the ball, and on the ball, what I'll do is put down a few questions, and I'll scotch tape them to cards. I'll toss the ball, and everyone's ready now. It's like being at a concert when the big ball is coming, but whomever gets it, and the funny thing is sometimes you have students go like this, they're not getting the ball, but some people, whoever catches it, is obliged to hang on to it, peel off one of the questions, turn on the mic, read the question, and then answer it. That's my way of checking in. And then we'll get to a little bit more, and then 10 minutes later I'll say, Sandra, toss the ball. And another will catch it and pull off the next question, and then answer it. And if he can't, he gets an assist, a co-counsel. That's kinesthetic. It gets everybody all of a sudden moving and waiting, because you don't know where the ball will drop next time. In the classroom, in the context of facilitating empathy, in addition to the story, in addition to incorporating different modalities of learning, in addition to checking in with my students, what did you hear? And asking another, what do you think about what was just said? I also endeavor to use some prompts, some opportunities to actually help to better anchor the information. Sometimes that might be a certain hat that I'll have a particular participant wear. Other times it might be using a game. Our students are game players. They've grown up with the medium. Sometimes it will be a row call where we'll go down the row, almost simulating a family feud. Top 10 answers on the board. In my professional responsibility class, we polled 100 lawyers now in jail for misconduct. We asked them, what got you here? The top 10 answers on the board. And then I go down the row and I see if the top 10 reasons for attorneys causing offense as an extension of their less than honorable or good faith mistakes in the practice, I go down the road to see, on the basis of the readings, what those top 10, as the students glean them, could be. Games are helpful. There's a mistake in many parts of the academy that making it fun means you're not serious. You can be both. And you can be quite stern at times when appropriate. But if that's a departure from your norm, oh my, does that pack a mightier impact, a mightier impact. A student said something to me today that actually touched me. He came up and I complimented him on his work. He's about to graduate. And I said, and he does so much, he works full time. I said, Eric, how are you able to balance it all? And he said, well, Professor, it's not so hard. He said, particularly, I have only 2 classes as I'm finishing up this semester. One of them is yours. I know you call on us routinely, even when we're not volunteering. And I can't bear that look of disappointment that you get. And I thought to myself, that's it. To have our students know how much we care about their process of learning is such a reciprocal form of caring and consideration. It's returned. To have a student then say back, and I can't bear to let you down, so I'll show up the best me under the circumstances to avoid that. That's extraordinary. That was a moment. Finally, and this is the danger of getting me started. I promise you 30 minutes and then exchange. Once I get started, my brother says his ears start to bleed after a while listening to me, but I could go on, but all of us could, because you're only here because you're passionate, committed teachers. Finally, and I'm going to abbreviate because I've taken too much time. Finally, the third and last question, and this is the one that I ask myself after class. I look for a half hour on the same day of class. Usually it doesn't happen right after. It may not happen until the evening, where I sit quietly and I think, and I try to remember as much as I can about that class, what went right, what went wrong. I jot down as much as I can in my notes, and then I think, did I see what needed to be seen? And sometimes the answer will be yes, and other times no. I think you were too bogged down with the coverage. You had to move forward, and understandably you did. It's the end of the semester. But then I'll think cumulatively, did I encourage my students to see what needs to be seen? And that is a common refrain in the semester. The why of it all, and this is how I'll end, and this is how I ended today. I gave a capstone. I think it's very, very important to open each semester with an important message to the class, to set the tone, not only of your expectations of them, but why this matters so much to you and why you care so much about this craft and artistry of teaching, and why it is such a privilege to do what you do. To start with the why. I close with the why. And at the law school, what I do is close with the why of why are you doing what you do? And I'm sure many of you would be answering to get a good job, to make money, to pay back student debt, because I wasn't sure what else I would do after college. There were all of those sorts of answers. But to get to the bigger why, and I suggest what the bigger why might be, the bigger why is that there is a star that you are under. It was put there for a reason. The bigger why is that it is no accident or coincidence that you are here, and happen to be more so here listening to these words. Coincidences, God's anonymity, the wink from God. You're supposed to be here. The why of it, because guess what? It's really not about you. You're learning to grow in stature and wisdom and eloquence and excellence and intellectual and emotional acuity to do the work that God put you here to do, to ease the pain of others. That's all that any one of us can hope to do, to see what needs to be seen, and if nothing else, bear benevolent witness to the other's pain, because there is no pain on earth that does not crave, at the very least, that benevolent witness. And to the extent that with the stature that you are amassing and the grandeur that the power of knowledge affords, you get to be that esteemed witness. And maybe with the grace of God, an engine for good to come into that being's lifetime, then you will have achieved more than success. Then you will have achieved significance. And that is my closing wish for my students and for all of us, that when all is said and done, it might be said that we led lives of significance. That's it. Thank you very much.